It's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Luis Duque from Meta, and he's going to give us a lot of advice going from academia to industry.
All right. Thanks so much for the intro. And let me just start. I want to point out that I wanted this to be, I think, probably more interactive than is currently possible. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about how I did a transition to the industry, a little bit about how I prepped. And all of this is based on conversations throughout the years that I've had with people that did a similar transition. The last of those conversations, a couple of those conversations happened yesterday because I interviewed like a couple of mathematicians that we recently hired just to double check if what I was going to share with you was outdated or not, but their experience was actually quite similar. So let me just get started. Can everyone hear me? Is everything okay?
Right? Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, so people can interact either by the chat box or by the Q&A box. And if anyone wants to talk, I can allow people to talk. So just send the, raise your hand or send the chat.
Yeah. Perfect. Let's do that. Let's just raise the hand if they want to talk. So let me start. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. The goal of me telling you about myself is like so you know where I was before I started doing the applications and before I started like making a decision of going towards the industry. So basically, I studied engineering in Colombia, electronical engineering. After doing my undergrad, I did work as a software developer engineer in C for like around a year. And my work was very focused on, back in the day, which was most of the coding that I did before going to the industry, was very focused on working for embedded devices. So basically, I will use C and very low-level languages, even assembler, to code very small machines, microcontrollers, microprocessors, banking devices, and absolutely nowhere close to even a computer that we use nowadays. It was like mostly like the type of data phones that you pass your card when you have to pay for something in a in an ATM or in or any store. I used to work with those devices, and actually the company that does those devices was our direct competitor back in the day, which is Ingenico. Okay, then after doing engineering, I did a master's in mathematics in Colombia, in the National University. Then I came to the United States and I worked. I did a PhD at UT Austin. My PhD was also quite theoretical. It was in differential equations. So I did not do a lot of coding during the PhD. And that was basically where I was when I started considering going to the industry, right? Let me just tell you why I started transitioning to the industry. So the first thought I had is that the market in academia was extremely competitive. And I was even okay with that competition. But what was very hard for me is like, it was very hard for me to even know where I was going to end up. In other words, I perceived the academia as like a path that I will take. And I did not know if I was going to end up in the middle of nowhere in a remote country or like in the middle of New York City. And for me, that variance, I didn't like to feel that variance in my head. It scared me. And that was like a big reason why I started considering other options. Also, I was in the industry before, and in the PhD, something that I felt, especially since it was so theoretical, I feel like the feedback loops were too like slow. You start working an idea, you don't really know if the idea is going to work, if it's going to end up in a paper. The whole process could take months, if not years. And in the industry, or honestly, each time you code, each time you deploy code, you get very quick feedback. And I like that. I wanted to move more towards that direction, right? So since I moved to the industry, I have worked recently for the past few months at Meta, 3 or 4 months, before at Netflix, before at Indeed, And then I work in Colombia a little bit in the industry that I already mentioned. Let me tell you very briefly what I have been doing. So at Meta, this is going to be, it has only been a few months. So what my team does is the following. Like, you know that transformers have had a huge impact in deep learning, in machine learning, and in the industry nowadays, right? And I concretely work in ads, right? And a huge chunk of the work that has been going on in ads is include transformers in the architecture of these models. Uh, I do not work in that architecture, but what we do is basically we use the same features that are basically very long time series of, let's say, IDs that are consumed by the transformers. What we do is that we do like traditional feature engineering, and we feed those features through the models in a more traditional way. So that's what we do. And what we do is not only we do research about how to do those transformations on long sequences to more traditional features, but what we do is that we also scale this effort. Ads, which is the department I work at Meta, has like around 500 models. So we not only need to think about what techniques do we want to escalate, but we need to think about how to escalate them because of the different families of models that we have. So that's basically what I've been doing for the past 3 or 4 months, and my entire team has been doing. This is an effort of tens of people, like easily 10 or 20 people directly involved, and easily many more other people that is supporting us. So that has been my experience at Meta. At Netflix, I basically owned a family of models that was used to predict the performances of shows. So more concretely, imagine that Netflix is going to launch, imagine that Netflix recently launched a show, a Squid Game, to talk about one. Imagine that Squid Game was launched 7 days ago. I had like, me and my team had like an entire portfolio of models what they will do is predict a lot of different metrics to track the performance of the show in a lot of different time horizons. For example, let's say that the Squid Game was launched 7 days ago, we will predict what the performance is going to be a year from now, a quarter from now. And by performance, I mean a lot of different metrics. The acquisition, how sticky the show is going to be, and even how much money is going to bring to the company. And then those predictions will be used by executives to decide like if seasons were going to be renewed or if they're not going to be renewed, and how much is Netflix willing to pay for those renewals. So and indeed, my work was actually quite similar to that of Netflix, except the space is entirely different. What we will do is we will try to estimate how much people was being hired because of jobs that were posted at Indeed, and we will do that as a job by job. Basically, the goal of my team and the goal of what I did at Indeed was, you have a new job, we want to know how many people was hired because of that particular job. And that was back in the day an estimation that was actually quite hard to do. And that was basically the core of my work. Now, let me talk about, right, do you have questions so far? I think I'm just going to start talking about the actual transition. But if you have questions so far, please let me know. If not, I'm going to continue. Okay, so let me continue. So the following, I'm going to start with something that was really scary for me. I don't know if this is scary for you, but it was really scary for me when I discovered it. And spoiler alert, when I discovered this, it was already too late. I did not manage to do an interview before making the transition, precisely because of how long this timeline is. And this is something that was a colleague brought my attention to about this yesterday, and I wanted to share the timeline that a colleague shared. And by the way, the colleague also did not manage to do an internship. The colleague went directly to the industry, but I'm going to share like what I think is the ideal timeline. So imagine that you graduate in June 2024. if you graduate in June 2024, you probably want to start applying for jobs by like January, February 2024, right? I'm sorry, you start interviewing by January, February 2024, and you probably want to interview at least with tens of companies, right? Depending on the job market. Sometimes it's going to be a couple, sometimes could be tens, right? If you want to start applying in January, February, if you want to start interviewing in January, February, you want to start applying around December, right? And you probably want to have had an internship around June 2023, right? And this is probably the scariest part of what I'm sharing with you, is that if you wanted to do an internship in June 2023, you probably wanted to be applying by October 2022. This timeline makes no sense to me, but it is how it currently works, right? And moreover, if you're planning a transition and you don't have experience interviewing or networking, you probably want to start making a decision about making an internship around March 2022. So notice that we're talking about like almost a 2-year time frame, right? The good news is that this is just what I think is the best scenario. And most of the people, including myself and including the people I talked with yesterday, did not manage to even plan for an internship, right? We went directly from the PhD to the industry, which is a little riskier, it's harder to prepare, but it also works like that. Let me stop for a second because I saw a second ago something in the chat. Okay,
yeah, it's just me sharing the link. I'll let you know if there is anything. Yeah.
Okay, please let me know. So now that I shared this timeline, let me tell you some thoughts I have, some common questions that people ask me when I met one-on-one people that wants to do this transition. So the question is, should I do an internship? I think the answer is yes. You should do an internship if you're doing like a PhD in any quantitative field. I think you should do it. But at least in my case, I had a lot of misconceptions about this. Like, I think many of these misconceptions came from the fact that I was familiar with 3 math departments. The one in my home university, one math department in which I spent like 6 months in Spain, and the math department at UT Austin. And when I reflect about those 3 experiences, those three math departments are extremely pure. Like they really don't encourage much, and they don't have much spaces like this one to talk about transition to the industry. Everyone in those departments is like really following a very, very, very pure career. And I don't think that's a good idea, right? But because of that, I had misconceptions that I even thought that doing an internship could even hurt my career. I don't think that's true at all. I think you should, if you do an internship, if you have the opportunity to do an internship, you should definitely take it. I know of people that even had internship possibilities and did not take them. I think that was a career mistake. And I feel like how you should see an internship more so than a career transition. I think you should see an internship as something that is going to help you make a very, very informed decision about what you want to do with your career, right? And if you don't do an internship, I feel like you're making a wild guess about your next step. So that's my thought. And also,
oh, I'm sorry to disturb, but there is one question by Christian, and I also have a question by myself. So Christian asks, given this roadmap, what time do someone need to know if the person goes to industry or academia just to make very good plans ahead?
So I think the answer to that question is the ideal answer is the ideal timeline. The ideal answer is that you will have to at least start considering an internship 2 years before, right? But for most of the people, including myself, we did not do an internship, right? So I think it's good to start at least a year before you're going to start applying to jobs. You should start networking. You should start preparing for for the interviews, and you should start kind of thinking like interviewing people about like what the possibilities are. What are the possibilities that I'm going to have after I graduate with my PhD? And I'm also going to talk about it, but those are questions that you should, at least I would say a year before, start thinking. Do I want pursue careers in software engineer? Do I want to pursue careers in data science, in machine learning, in finance? So I'm sorry for giving you a non-answer, but the answer that I'm giving you is two. The ideal scenario, you do an internship, so you start preparing for an internship 2 years before, or you don't do an internship, but then you will have like the last year of your PhD or the last 9 months to at least start preparing and considering a different career path than the one that you're more familiar with. So that's my answer.
And I have another point. So, when you're talking about internship, you're kind of looking for, the best internship one can get. If you go to machine learning, maybe you want an internship in Meta. If you want to finance, maybe you want, one of the top places in Wall Street. But a lot of time you have pure math students that will not get this internship, and they may start with an internship in a smaller company, have more experience, and then get other internships. So sometimes you have to make a little bit of a different planning.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't. I mean, obviously ideal, obviously fantastic if you get an offer for an internship in a like top-notch place, right? But I will say, I don't know if this is controversial, but I will say that the biggest outcome that you can get from the internship is exposure with the industry, exposure with like how do you use math to tackle real industry problems, and you will get that exposure almost regardless of the company. So what I will add to what you say is that yes, it's fantastic if you manage to land a top-notch uh, uh, internship, but like everyone knows that for you to land a top-notch industry internship, you need to do like you need to be ready to prepare for like years before. And
Yeah.
a lot of people are not going to be doing that. I didn't do it. Most of the people I talked to didn't do it. The person I talked to yesterday that shared this timeline did not do it. He told me this was the ideal timeline, but he basically started preparing around June of the previous year, and he did not do an internship either. So that's what I will amend about your comment. Mhm.
Okay. There's also a question by Alejandro Fernandez. I share it with everyone. So, can you talk about how companies feel about interviewing someone who had not graduated yet? I will graduate early next year, and I'm interviewing in some companies now, but they sometimes want people who are already graduated or who can start within a month.
Okay. So, I mean, I think those are two separate questions. Like one question is if the company wants people that graduates within a month, then that's something that you cannot control. Then you cannot pursue that opportunity. Uh, and that does happen, but in my experience, that has been very unusual. I feel like if you apply, companies tend to be very welcoming towards you interview with them, probably months in advance, and they give you several months to finish your PhD. That has been my experience. So basically, one part of the question was about companies demanding you to start right ahead. That's something that you cannot control. You just move to a different opportunity because, like, what else? But then the other one was, could you repeat the question? I think there was something else that I wanted to add.
Yeah, and by the way, you can click on the Q&A and you'll see it, and
Yeah.
maybe if you share a screen, other people will see it.
Yeah, but you mentioned a question of, could you repeat the question of Alejandro Fernandez, please? I
Sure,
don't see it.
sure. But if you click on Q&A below, you can also see it, and maybe people will see it when you share it. You see Q&A with number
But
one?
but in the Q&A, I only see the last question I see is Christian question. I don't see
Oh,
Alejandro's
no, this is
question.
the chat box. But anyway,
In Q&A. Let me see.
yeah.
Oh, that's good. I see. Let me look.
It's next to the share button.
More Q&A. Okay, perfect. Okay. So the first part, the second part of the question was about something that you cannot control. If a company wants you tomorrow and you cannot work tomorrow, you just say no. That's it. It's unusual, but I know it happens. And the first question is about how companies feel about interviewing someone that has not graduated yet. I mean, obviously depending on the market, but I feel like a lot of people that does the transition has not graduated yet and also has no experience, no industry experience. But there are ways that I'm going to mention in a second of feeling that gap a little bit. You can do projects on your own. If you take very applied machine learning classes that involve like projects in areas that the industry is demanding. For example, machine learning, deep learning using Python, using PyTorch, using TensorFlow, maybe. That's also going to help fill the gap. And if you take those classes and you do a couple of projects involving tools that you know that companies are currently demanding, then you make sure that you put that very close to the top of your resume. So that was the other part of my question. So yeah, the industries will also demand people that is fresh graduate for sure. I mean, we recently have hired many people that just graduated from the PhD. Let me see another question.
Yeah,
I
there's
see
a
another
question
question
by
here.
Daniel. Yeah.
Daniel Miao. It says, for internship, it seems more difficult for people to get an internship if they are not graduating in the next 1 or 2 years, as many companies ask for the expected graduation date. Do you have advice for young graduate students currently in their second and third years how to get an internship? I am honestly not aware of companies wanting interns to graduate in the next year or two. So like my only advice that I have is apply to everything you see, because this is something that you cannot control. Like if companies claim to want only internships or only interns that are going to graduate in 2 years or a year from now, you just apply and move to the next company. That's basically it. That's what I will do. This whole applying process, both for internships and for jobs, at least in my experience, is a massive effort. Basically, it's not about 2 or 3 applications. We're talking about tens, many tens of applications. So you just apply. If the company, you just apply and network as much as you can with people in that company. But ultimately, there are a lot of factors that you cannot control. If they're going to come out with thresholds, such that the one you're mentioning, you just move to the next application, but still apply. You apply a network, but just move quick. That's my advice.
So let me just mention, it depends on the area. Like in finance, for example, they like to have people who, right after the internship, they want to hire the people for permanent jobs. But in machine learning, it's common to take, very talented people earlier on in their earlier years for internships.
I see. It's because I don't see internships. First of all, like disclaimer, I did not see an internship. I didn't do an internship, but I don't see an internship as something that is necessarily going to come out with a job offer after. I feel like companies have these internship positions and they definitely try making offers to those interns, but it's very hard, both for the companies and for the interns, to just translate the internship into a full-time offer, because timelines might not align, and that's hard both for the company and for the intern. So it's hard for me to believe that companies want interns to graduate soon after. That's for me, it sounds to me like an unrealistic timeline, but it probably does happen. Mm-hmm. So let me go to the next point that I had here. Okay. Let me just point something else here about the point that I was just saying before. It's just like this resonated a lot when I was making the transition. It's like I remember talking with a professor at UT, asking him questions about the industry, again, in a department in which a lot of people don't think about this, back in the day at least, because it was the pure math department. UT also has an applied math department. And I remember asking him questions about the industry transition, and he told me, Luis, you're really thinking, you're doing good about thinking ahead, because most of the mathematicians, a very small percentage of the mathematicians that graduate today are going to be publishing papers and doing pure research in 10 years. So it's good to start thinking of like alternative career paths. And that's what I did, basically. So I already talked about this. What if I didn't do an internship? It's not the end of the world at all. If you don't do an internship, that maybe you will have to prep closer to your graduation. But that's something that a lot of people do. I did, and it's extremely common. Another common question that I get is how to network and get referrals. So here, like you, of course, you first want to start with your inner circle. In your inner circle, who do you know that already went to the industry? Then you start extending to like what persons that graduated with your same advisor went to the industry and started working with them. Then you keep enlarging that circle. Then what people from my same university went to the industry? And then you keep enlarging that circle and enlarging your network to try to schedule meetings with these people, ask them how was their transition, and potentially even get referrals from them. That's what I suggest. I also went to a lot of recruitment events that happen on campus at UT to network, to know what the industry is demanding, to know what companies are hiring, to know what type of positions could be a good fit. And I find those experiences like very, very enriching. And I suggest you do that. And like the positions I considered were the following: were software engineering, machine learning engineering positions, research scientist positions, and quant research, quant developer positions in finance, and also data scientist positions. Those were the positions that I considered when I did the industry. I did not prioritize much the preparation, which maybe it was a mistake. I kind of tried prepping for them all, but I did prioritize doing being very good at coding, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. So, what is the preparation? What is the typical preparation? So I will say I put this first because at first I think that this is the single largest gap. Is that for good or for bad, the coding interviews turned into a class that is taught in undergrad that is called algorithms and data structures. That class I never took, so I had to fill that gap. I remember that when I was filling that gap, someone told me because I had no idea what that was, and I didn't know if I was going to be on track for prepping. But someone told me, look, the material of that class is harder than calculus and easier than undergrad real analysis. So that gave me more or less an estimate of the time that it will take me to like digest this material. And to add about how to prep, a tool called LeetCode became kind of a standard to prep for these interviews. And I will add that like what you need to learn from LeetCode is obviously LeetCode is endless. So the common question is how many questions should I work on? And the answer to that question obviously varies from people, but I suggest two lists of questions. One was very popular like 3 years ago, which is called Blind 75. If you Google it, you will find this list of questions. It's 75 questions that cover most of the patterns that appear in interviews. And then a more recent one is called NeetCode 150. And that's basically an enlargement of the Blind 75 list that has what I think are all of the patterns that appear most commonly in interviews. I listed some of the patterns, but if you go to NeetCode is a website. If you go to this NeetCode website and you look for the problems, you will find the 150 problems, and the patterns that come to mind are quick sort, merge sort, depth first search, breadth first search, double pointers, topological sort, and maybe 4 or 5 others that I might be missing. And that's it. I didn't pay monthly. I suggest if you have the resources to pay monthly for lead code, and that's it. Preparation for machine learning. For machine learning, like you probably want to take a machine learning class that is as hands-on as it could be, right? And by hands-on, I mean that it's very heavy on Python. It teaches you like common machine learning techniques such as cross-validation, linear regression, regularization, tree-based methods, neural networks, and hopefully it has like one or two projects that you get hands-on experience and you code, you create your Git repo, you share with people, and involve Python, PyTorch, sklearn, as many of those tools as you can. That's like I will say step one that I find very helpful. And to the question that I think Alejandro asked before or someone asked before, this class will help you fill the gap between what you did as a mathematician and what you will be doing in the industry, which is probably going to involve a lot of what happens in this class. Now, what follows next is unclear to me if it's required for entry-level positions or is more for more senior positions, right? But there is a book called Machine Learning System Design Interview by Alex Su that explains basically how machine learning, how the class that I mentioned before is actually used in the industry. They explain roughly how the systems that we work on work behind the scenes and how the research is actually developed and scaled and actually ends up reaching users. Also, same story here. I don't know if this is required or not to entry-level positions, but there is a person that is called Big Tech Mentor that put a class that is called it's $100 and it's only like 1 hour or two. I found it very valuable by same story. I don't know if this is for more senior positions or more entry level. So I suggest you during the networking that you have to do on the transition, you also ask about how to prep for machine learning. And for quant interview, I was talking with people that actually did internships in finance and work in finance yesterday before coming to Meta, and they surprised me, but they also mentioned like the traditional books that are quant prep books. One is by Shu, another one is by Joshi, and another one is by Crack. Those books are going to have probability questions and brain teasers that they told me that are still up to date. And that's basically all I had prepared for this presentation. If you have any questions, did we run out of time?
No, we
Probably
didn't.
we
And
did.
yeah, this is great. So we have enough time for questions. We'll continue with questions, and then there will also be a more personal section afterwards. Yeah, so people, you can type your questions in the Q&A box. For one more time, I'm going to put the link because I see some few people joined. Take this off. Okay. Yeah, so until people ask you questions, one thing I'm curious, you mentioned finance, but you're in machine learning, but did you try to get an interview in finance?
Yeah, I tried. I interview each time. Each time I interview for both. But I feel like my preparation has historically been a little more biased towards tech. So I tend to get offers from tech first, and they are typically offers that I like. So this has happened 3 times in my life. But each time I do a job search, I do the job search in both of the industries.
So one
Yeah.
thing I know, from students that I talked to that wanted to get jobs in machine learning but wanted to get very high salary is that if they wanted to negotiate on the salary, they needed another offer from finance because then the salary would be higher. So they could, it would be easier to negotiate on salaries.
I mean, that's 100% true, because
Yeah.
especially as an entry level, I mean, it's a fact of life, almost a negotiation tactic. Like you have two players here. And the companies are going to know that if you are fresh, you don't have other offers, they are just going to offer you, like I will say, a general package. A general package is not going to be bad, it's going to be still be good, but you're going to definitely be able to push further if you have other offers. And something that you find out here that I don't feel comfortable sharing because this is going to be recorded, right, is that there are pairs of companies out there that try to outcompete each other, right? So there are a couple of tech players that are often, you know, that if you get one offer from one, the other one is just going to want you to not take it and increase it. And also I know of another couple of places, one from tech and one from finance, that I know they like outbidding each other. And I know that finance companies also do that. So yeah, that's something that happens. But at least my experience has been in every job search was I was always happy to get an offer. And from there to having multiple offers landed at the same time for me to make them outbid, I haven't been in the situations that many times. I really haven't. So for me, it has always been a big gain to be able to switch. That has been for me. In other words, if you are focusing on doing the transition, I will focus on optimizing getting an offer versus optimizing getting several offers at the same time. And those two mindsets are actually very, very different, right? Because if your mindset is I want to get a lot of offers at the same time, then you also want to interview with a lot of companies at the same time. And if you get feedback or if you realize of weaknesses in your preparation while you're prepping, you won't be able to fill those gaps. That's why I have never done that. What I typically do is I interview with a handful of companies first. Then I see how the interviews are going. Then I step up my preparation. Basically, I get that feedback to improve my preparation, then do that with other 3 or 4, and so on and so forth. I have never pushed myself to interview with 5 or 6 companies at the same time because of fears of not being able to adjust my preparation. But I know people that has done it, and if you feel like you can do it, by all means, do it. Mm.
I have a related questions, and there are already also two other questions, but you mentioned about kind of interviewing at different companies, and you also kind of I see that you moved from different companies. So can you tell a little bit about the move from different companies? Because I see it's very common in machine learning.
Uh, yeah, the work-life balance changes a lot from company to company. The work-life balance changes a lot company to company. It also varies a lot team to team, right? I will say that the work-life balance at least at Netflix and at Meta is it's a little tougher, rougher than it was, for example, at Indeed, and that's not necessarily bad. I feel like when I was at Indeed, at least in my particular team, there was like a great work-life balance, but at the same time, we were not pursuing research opportunities at the same pace that I have done at Netflix at Meta. So in other words, the work-life balance is good or bad depending on how you look at the situation. For me, working 20, 25 hours per week didn't feel like enough, but also working 50 or 60 feel like too much. So I think each person needs to look for that balance. And it's going to, unfortunately, it's going to be team dependent, and it's also going to be company dependent. And it's something that is worth bringing up during your interviews. I will not phrase the question like that, but I wouldn't phrase the question as how many hours do we work per week. But I will definitely share the question about. I will definitely phrase the questions. I'm sorry. I will phrase that question tangentially, such as, "Hey, do you have to do on calls? How often? How clean is your code base? How often do you have to, let's say, work on the weekend because your code base broke?" I will phrase the question like that because that would also tell you about the engineering culture and the research culture of the company, right? If you have a company that is extremely hacky, that people just pushes changes in the code regardless of the quality, that's going to have an impact on your weekends, and you probably don't want to go to those places, or maybe you want. So that's something that is definitely worth asking. Mm-hmm. That's also good to ask to people that works there when you're networking. When you're networking, when you know someone that works in the company, it's a very safe space for you to ask this type of questions. So that's very good. That's very good to ask during networking. By the way, I saw a question about networking. Could someone read it? Or let me see it. I think I saw it and I lost it.
Yeah, so okay, this is done. Then I'm going to the next one. I'm curious about the networking strategies you mentioned earlier. How do you approach networking with someone you don't know, especially when it comes to asking for a reference?
Yeah, so first of all, I never ask for reference to someone I don't know. That's it. That never worked for me. I feel we are doing it. But what I do, and what I have done many times, and that's why it's so important to plan ahead, because I have both referred people that I don't know in the following way and ask for referrals in the following way. As long as you do it with long time in advance, what you can do is the following. You can, and I have done this strategy many times, you can, for example, connect with someone that you have an indirect connection. For example, imagine that someone that you know that graduated from the PhD that you don't know but you know exists is already in the industry. You can reach out to this person through LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I know you graduated. I know you graduated in this year. I know that you are in the industry. Is it possible that we chat?" The person is very likely going to say yes. Then in that chat, you have a very candid conversation about what your thoughts are. You ask the person for advice about how to prep, for advice about how to network. You ask the person about how was her trip, his or her trip, right? And then you establish that connection. Then maybe you follow up in the next month a couple of times. And then after a while, after you have done your due diligence of preparing, you write this person and said, "Hey, you know what? Following the conversation that we had some months ago, I have been prepping and I think I'm ready to interview. And I saw this opportunity in your company. Can you refer me?" Very likely they are going to say yes. And I know because I've done this infinitely times, and each time it has worked. So that's the strategy I suggest you take, right? Because a referral out of the blue is unlikely. Yeah. So that's it. That's what I will do. That's why it's so important to plan ahead of time, right? Let me go to the next question of anonymous attendee. Is there a difference in the application process for research positions for specific areas like computer vision and large language models and general data science to machine learning positions? How important are publications in application process for internships in general? Okay, so the thing in my case is that I always apply for general positions, right? I have never applied to a position that is specific for computer visions or large language models. My guess is that for those positions, you probably need way more exposure in the area, in that particular area. I'm sorry, that you need for the general positions. So for those, you probably not only need the general machine learning type of class that I mentioned before, or the general machine learning knowledge that I shared before, but you probably want either projects already in that area or publications in that area. That's my wild guess. But here I suggest, again, networking with someone that already has one of those positions. Something else, and something that has been remarkably positive, I can talk from my perspective at Meta, is that in Meta, there is a lot of mobility. I am surprised about the mobility that I have seen in Meta. So what I have seen is that people just joins Meta, they join as software engineers or research scientists or machine learning engineers. Those positions in my department are easy translatable, right? And then after a year or so, they 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 transfer to a position that they like maybe better. That could be computer vision, large language models. In my very short tenure at Meta, I have seen this happening like 10 times already. So a lot of companies have a lot of mobility. So my suggestion is like, as long as you have your foot on the door, you just go, do your job, you're still going to learn a lot. And if you want to transition, there will be possibilities for transitioning even internally in the future. So how important is it in-person meeting? And a question from Riley O'Neill. How important is in-person networking, and what is the preferred venue for doing so? Do you go to many machine learning conferences, or do machine learning scientists prefer sending discords? I guess, Riley. So before the pandemics, I tried prioritizing meeting in person, right? But after the pandemics, there is a new reality, and the new reality is that everyone, including myself, is used to meeting remotely. Is better, faster, uh, it's significantly easier. So I will say that, like, if you want to meet with a person that you reach out, let's say that you reach out from someone to someone in LinkedIn, someone that, let's say, graduated from your same university, and it's in the industry, right? You can ask this person, hey, can we meet with a video call? And I feel like that's going to be more than enough. I've done that many times, and it's good. Uh, yeah, so that's my answer. You should go. You should you should remote. You should meet remotely, because that will also open the pool of people that you could meet. If you only meet in person and you're in Minnesota, then your opportunities are really, really reduced to Minnesota. Same in the Bay Area. If I want to meet people in person, and I only do it in Bay Area, it's going to be very limited. But if you open yourself to remote meetings, I can meet people from New York. I can meet people from San Francisco. I can meet people from Chicago, which I have done so. So it's way better to meet remote. So that's it. So do you go to many ML conferences, and do ML scientists prefer certain Discord channels? So I feel like I don't go to that many ML conferences, and I feel like I should, but I suggest you go to ML conferences. I feel like that's a fantastic place for networking. I feel like I tend to do more network inside the companies I am, because these companies are still huge, and they do a lot of machine learning research. There are a lot of machine learning efforts. So unfortunately, I think this has been a weakness on my end. I don't go to that many machine learning conferences, but I do suggest you go.
Yeah, let me just
Prefer
mention that in the big machine learning conferences and computer vision conferences, there are a lot of opportunities for hiring, and companies actually are aiming for
exactly.
it. So,
Exactly. So those conferences are, in my opinion, as good as uh, career how do you say, career fairs to land jobs. For me, those things are basically the same. Every single of my colleagues of Netflix, I remember that at Meta, that goes to those conferences, they already go with a plan for recruiting. Every single time this happened, and I heard of the plan, but then I don't go to a conference. But yeah, that's I really suggest. Uh, is the age important on the transition from academic to industry? I honestly, I don't think it's important at all. I don't think it's important at all. Like, I don't know, a lot of people do this very, very early. Like, some people finish the PhD by the time they are 23 or 24. I have some colleagues that are 20, 23, 24. I just made this transition. I did this transition when I was in my, what, 30, 33, 34. And I know of people that has made this transition even later. So I don't think this is going to be an issue at all. Uh, I want to point out that, like, the industry, especially research position, especially machine learning positions, the fact of life, they do like people coming from the academia. So regardless of your age, I'm pretty sure that there are doors that you knock, they're gonna open. Even if you are a tenured professor, you will see opportunities. You will see opportunities. The blocker, if you are a tenured professor, the blocker for you to not be able to land those opportunities is the fact that some companies are not going to just bypass you a coding interview. So you will have to probably go to the same coding loops that a junior engineer goes through. So that's potentially going to be a blocker. But from the point of view of the industry, they want to hire you for sure. So that's it. The next question, anonymous attendee. You have been in the industry for a long time now and hold a PhD. What is the biggest draw from the PhD? Was it worth looking backwards? Yes, I think it was 100% worth it because, because what I like about mathematics and what I like about PhD is the amount of flexibility that it gives you in the career, in your career. In other words, I did a PhD in math and I had no clue what was going to be trendy. I had no clue what was going to be cool. I had no clue what the industry was going to demand. I don't know. In the same way that you don't know it, that you don't know now what's going to happen in 5 years. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. But what I know for sure is that this blend of mathematics, coding, computer science, this blend that we know, almost whatever happens is going to involve math, is going to involve computer science, is going to involve quantitative reasoning. And that's like where you are going to have like a huge advantage. Let me phrase this in a different way. You with a PhD are going to be way better suited for industry changes than a person that, for example, is a person that is a pure software engineer that has been like coding for 15 or 20 years. That person, if that person wants to transition, the transition is probably going to be harder, precisely because the industry changes are going to involve not only coding, but are going to involve math, are going to involve computer science, are going to involve quantitative reasoning. And once you have a PhD in these fields, you are you're going to be able to jump in these trends easily. And I'm sorry for being repetitive. Imagine that you are starting a PhD 10 years ago or 5 years ago. There is no way in the world that you will say, oh, I'm going to do generative AI because this is the future. No one knew that. Absolutely no one knew that. There were hundreds of different efforts. Imagine a particle swamp optimization type of problem of a lot of universities, a lot of research groups doing a lot of different efforts. It's impossible for you to know which one is fruitful. But what you know is that across those efforts, there is math, there is engineering, there is quantitative knowledge, and knowing that is more valuable that guessing that Gen AI was going to be cool. So that's it. Is there a demand for biomedical engineers or data scientists at Meta? Can you introduce the mind work the health and well-being team has been doing recently? So the answer to this question is that I don't know what is the demand for specific biomedical engineers at Meta. I don't know that demand, and I also don't know what Meta is doing in those two fields. But let me tell you something different, right? Let me tell you something different. It's because each time I do a job search, both when I was in Colombia, when I finished the PhD, when I was looking for jobs to change companies, each time I never tackled the question of finding my next job as like, this is what I do now. What company is also doing that? I never tackled that question like that. I tackled that question as like, this is what I know. What of what I know could be used by the companies? So if I rephrase your question like that, I know that a lot of the work that you do as a biomedical engineer involves coding, involves wrangling data, involves Python, involves science, involves mathematics, involves statistics. So instead of asking what is, how can Meta hire a biomedical engineer, I will ask what of my skills can be are being applied by the company. So that's it. I will phrase that question in a different way if I was looking for a job. That's it. That because you phrase it in a way, you are not going to be looking for that specific perfect tailor-made job for you that might not exist, right? But you will open your spectrum to like, what is it that the industry is doing with the knowledge I have? So that's it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Luis. I asked you before, but you had all these questions. So I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about the transitioning between different jobs, because I see it's very common in machine learning. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me tell you, if you want, I can tell you what was my rationale, because I think about this often. What was my rationale and why I, for example, changed jobs or changed teams? And it's because, let me tell you, for example, when I moved from Indeed to Netflix, something that I was feeling is that my job involved a lot of engineering and a lot of data science. But back in the day, we're talking about what year? We're talking about 20, like probably 4 years ago, 2019, 2020. What I was feeling is that I didn't have enough exposure of cloud computations, cloud computing. I didn't have a lot of exposure of for that at Indeed. So a part of me wanted to just learn about what AWS was and how to like actually scale our experiments. The science that we were doing, I wanted to learn how to scale it at the scale of Amazon Web Services and things like that. So I basically wanted to learn. I wanted to learn new techniques, new tools, new technologies that I was not going to be exposed in the role I had at Indeed. So that's the reason why I went from basically Indeed to Netflix. At Netflix, I also changed team like a couple of times, actually only once. And at Netflix, the good thing is that I started to use this cloud computing to deploy my models and to basically blend science and engineering at a larger scale that I did before, right? But something that was kind of pushing me in the back of my brain, to do the transition, is that at Netflix, I didn't have exposure about how to serve models in real time, right? And I also didn't have a lot of exposure with deep learning and deep learning frameworks. More concretely, my work at Netflix involved mostly tree-based methods and very traditional machine learning methods, and it did not involve that much deep learning. So that's the reason I felt like the industry is going very quickly towards deep learning is universally accepted, and I feel like that my skills were not up to date. So that's what I wanted to make the transition to Meta. Uh, so so that's it. I think that the reason why people change teams or people change companies in this industry is precisely because of this. You are in a company, you are in a team, you realize that, at least in my case, I realized that the market is going in that one direction, but maybe my current team is staying in a direction that maybe I don't want to continue. I want to learn new things. And that's, I think, why people changes company or teams. And I want to point out that also is very different in different companies changing teams. That's something that you could also bring uh, early on to conversations when you're doing networking. You ask, okay, how is it to change teams in this company or in the other one? That's also, in my opinion, is a good factor for picking a good company. Is that is a company that allows you to change teams, and those things are common. That's something that I will add. Yeah.
yeah, thank you very much, Luis. We are right on time. Um, for the next session, do you want to take a break before we start this session? You start it or?
Maybe 5 minutes. We'll start at 12:30.
Okay. So I
It's only
have,
it's
yeah,
only
we
half an
start.
hour, right?
Yeah. So we'll take a 5 minute break and then you join the other session with the students that Daniel Miao is in charge of. If you can see, there is a Zoom link here. I can also email it to here. I put it in the
Ah,
chat box.
could you please email that link to me?
Yeah, I'll email it to you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. So, okay, you have 5 minutes. Okay. Bye, everyone, and thanks
All right.
again. It's great talk.
See you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I'm staying here so people can copy the link.